Welcome back to the This Old Baker podcast. I'm Kim. Today I want to walk you through my whole gravy mix collection. Chicken, brown, onion, and country. Not as 4 separate recipes to remember, but as one method with 4 flavor forks. Because once the method clicks, you can build your own gravy mix without ever looking at a recipe card again. Every single one of these starts the same way. You melt 2 tablespoons of fat, butter, bacon fat, chicken fat. Whatever you got, you add 2 to 3 tablespoons of dry mix. And you cook that, stirring constantly for about 3 minutes until it's lightly golden and smells nutty. That's a roux. That step is non-negotiable, and it's the one people rush. Here's why it matters. Raw flour tastes like raw flour. A little chalky, a little bitter. Cooking it in fat for those 3 minutes changes the starch and cooks the taste out. Skip it, and your gravy tastes like paste no matter how good your seasonings are. Once the roux's cooked, you whisk in 1 cup of liquid, gradually, whisking the whole time. Bring it to a boil, drop it to a simmer, and it thickens in about 2 minutes. That's it. That's the whole mechanic every time. So if the method's identical, what actually makes chicken gravy taste different from brown gravy? That's where it gets interesting. The first fork is which bouillon goes into your dry mix. My chicken gravy mix uses powdered chicken bouillon plus poultry seasoning, thyme, and parsley. The herb combination that makes something smell like Sunday dinner with a roast chicken. My brown gravy mix swaps that for beef, bouillon, garlic powder, onion powder, and paprika. Bolder, meatier, less herby. Same roux, same technique, completely different personality because of 1 ingredient swap. And here's a detail most people miss. My brown gravy mix doesn't have cornstarch in it at all. It's just flour and bouillon and spices. But the chicken gravy mix has a 1/4 cup of cornstarch blended in alongside the flour. That's intentional. Cornstarch gives a silkier texture and a lighter color, which suits a chicken dish. For brown gravy, I want that deeper, slightly heavier roux texture. Fits pot roast and Salisbury steak better than something silky would. So that's fork number 1. Pick your bouillon, decide if you want silky or hearty, and you've got 2 totally different gravies from the same 3 minutes of stirring. Second fork, my onion gravy mix. It starts from that same beef bouillon base as brown gravy, but I add a 1/2 cup of dried minced onion and extra onion powder into the dry mix. Dried onion rehydrates right in the roux and gives you actual texture, not just onion flavor. Little bits you can see and bite into. And when I make onion gravy, I finish it with a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce and a 1/2 teaspoon of a browning sauce, like Kitchen Bouquet, whisked in at the end. That's not in the other 3. It deepens the color to that almost mahogany brown you get from a proper pub-style onion gravy. And it adds a savory backbone that plain bouillon alone doesn't give you. So fork 2 is texture and finish, adding something that doesn't fully dissolve and adjusting the liquid at the very end instead of just the dry mix up front. Now here's the one that trips people up. My country gravy mix, sawmill gravy, if you grew up calling it that, has no bouillon in it at all. None. Instead, the dry mix has a full cup of dry milk powder. That's the real fork. Chicken, brown, and onion are all stock-based gravies. They're built to taste like a roast or a pot of broth reduced down. Country gravy is a dairy gravy. It's built to taste like biscuits and cream and black pepper. When you cook that roux and whisk in milk or water, the milk powder blooms and gives you that classic white peppery diner breakfast gravy. Completely different flavor family. Same 3-minute roux. So if a recipe calls for gravy and you're staring at your pantry trying to decide which mix to grab, Ask yourself one question. Am I making something that tastes like a roast or something that tastes like biscuits and cream? That answers it every time. Quick side note before we get to the fixes. If you're using any of these in a slow cooker, you can actually skip the roux step entirely. Sprinkle 2 to 3 tablespoons of the dry mix right over your chicken or roast. Add a half cup of broth and let the slow cooker do the work over hours instead of minutes. The starch dissolves and thickens as it cooks low and slow. No stovetop, no whisking. That's the one exception to always make the roux, and it's a good one to know before a busy week. And if you're converting a recipe that calls for a store-bought packet, 2 to 3 tablespoons of any of these mixes equals 1 standard 0.87 ounce packet. Write that conversion right on your jar label. You will not remember it at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday with a hungry kid at the counter, and neither will I. Now, even with all that, Gravies still misbehaves sometimes. Quick fixes, because these come up constantly. Too thin, simmer it another few minutes, or whisk a teaspoon of instant mashed potato flakes in. It dissolves fast and thickens without changing the flavor. Lumpy? 9 times out of 10, it's because hot liquid got added to the roux too fast. Whisk constantly, add liquid gradually, and if lumps do form, a quick pass with an immersion blender fixes it in seconds. Bland? That usually means a roux didn't get enough time or the dish it's covering didn't have much flavor to start. A swirl of butter at the very end, right before serving, fixes more bland gravy than any spice you could add. So that's the whole collection, really. 1 roux, 4 forks. Bouillon type changes the base flavor. Adding something chunky like dried onion changes the texture. And swapping bouillon for milk powder moves you into a completely different family of gravy altogether. Once you've got that roux technique down, you don't need my recipes anymore. You need your own jar, built around whatever you actually cook most. Start with brown gravy mix. If you've never made your own, it's the simplest one to build confidence with. Full recipes and the mix ratios for all 4 are up at thisoldbaker.com, linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.